Sup you beautiful people, hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Naruto Was the Son of Kaguya Otsutsuki. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So now let's start this video. The training ground that Naruto found himself, once his son and friends caught up to him, was covered mostly in trees. A small clearing was the only reprieve that one would have from the green forest, other than a path that wound its way from the clearing to the edge of the domestic district of Konoha. A river cut through part of the clearing, artificial in nature. It was said that the Nidoime Hokage created it by accident while practicing higher in the mountains around Konoha. It was in this training ground 3 as it was called, that Naruto raised an eyebrow at the sole Uchiha of the group, her request taking him and Minato and Kushina by surprise, though he suspected both had seen this coming. "I'm sorry," Naruto said to Mikoto, shaking his head as if to clear his ears, "but I thought you said you wanted to fight me." The disbelief in his voice was quite clear. "Correct, Naruto," Mikoto told the disguised man. "Kushina told me that you defeated several ninja. I wish to see if this is true." Naruto turned his head to look at Kushina, who blushed red and chuckled, averting her gaze. Naruto then turned back to Mikoto. He knew that Minato had told Kushina a short version of the story that he had told him, but he had hoped that Kushina would have had a bit of self-control when it came to things that should remain with the relevant parties. He understood that Mikoto was her friend, but she had no business knowing his story and Kushina had no right to tell her. That was reserved to Minato and himself. "Could I not demonstrate on the logs?" Naruto asked, gesturing to the 3 logs that were standing in the clearing, quite out of place if he said so himself, but they might be there for a reason. "Those aren't used to practice taijutsu, Tucson," Minato told his father. "They're actually used for the final test for academy students to decide if they're ready to become genin." Naruto gave a sigh. He could fight Mikoto, but that run the risk of her activating her Sharingan and spotting the illusion, yet not fighting her could rock the trust that Minato had for him. Minato might believe his story and trust in what he said, but that trust was still new and fragile. Not fighting Mikoto, for whatever reason, could result in the breaking said trust, especially when he had no reason as to why he couldn't fight. Thus, his choice was obvious. "If I fight you, you don't use your dojutsu," Naruto told her. "It's an unfair advantage considering that I can't use chakra to the capacity that you can, nor was I trained like you were." Naruto hoped they bought it. Having Mikoto agree to the restriction of pure taijutsu would make the chance of being discovered far lower. There was always the chance of her activating her clan's Kekkei Genkai subconsciously, but he could only pray to whatever deity was out there that it didn't happen. "Deal," Mikoto agreed, to Naruto's relief. "I don't know what made you think that I would use the Sharingan in my fight with you, Naruto. You may be skilled in taijutsu, but you are only a civilian while I am a fully trained jonin. There should be no need for me to activate it." Naruto felt for a moment that if he opened his mouth to dignify those words with a response, that he would be able to taste the arrogance. While not to the level that he had experience with other Uchiha clansmen that he had run into in the past, he was posing as a civilian who weren't known for their power. The arrogance that Mikoto displayed was quite annoying to someone who knew that they would be able to crush her with both eyes closed and hands tied behind their back. Naruto said nothing. He turned around and walked to the other side of the clearing, towards the strange kunai-like monument that stood near one end of the clearing. Turning around, he found Mikoto was dressed in shinobi uniform, a green flak jacket, just like Kushina, with a black, no-sleeved shirt along with a pair of pants of the same color underneath. A pouch was strapped to Mikoto's right thigh, another strapped to her left. A forehead protector was wrapped around her left arm. She wore no armor aside from the flak jacket, and 2 shin guards strapped to her legs. As if sensing the question within his head, Mikoto spoke without a prompt. "I always come prepared for anything, Naruto. It comes with being an infiltration expert. You'd also be surprised at the training that you undertake when you strive to be an infiltration expert. Changing speed is one of those things, I presume?" Naruto questioned with a bit of disbelief in his voice. "You'd be surprised it saved my life more than once," Mikoto told him. "Minato, would you mind being the proctor?" Minato shuffled slightly from his position at the side of the clearing, Kushina beside him, slightly uncomfortable with what was happening. On one hand, this was something that he knew he would have brought up sooner or later, and would have most likely settled with Naruto giving a demonstration of his skills, so really he shouldn't have anything to be uncomfortable with. But on the other hand, he wasn't exactly okay with Mikoto potentially beating up his father. Sure, his father had said that he had taken down shinobi, but that had been almost 2 decades ago, plenty of time for skills to deteriorate, along with the body. "Minato," Naruto called, breaking Minato out of his inner argument and causing him to look to his father. "Call the match." Minato gave a nod at the look in his father's eyes. He was certain about this match, and not being pressured into it, that was enough to put his conscience at ease. "Are both participants ready?" Minato questioned, a nod from both sides of the clearing being his answer. "Begin." Mikoto was the first to move, blurring across the distance between herself and Naruto at a speed that would make most Chunin blanch. To Mikoto, she knew this was nothing. She could easily go twice her current speed, but took no pleasure in fighting Naruto. Her words might have sounded like she did, but she was doing what she was in order to look out for Minato. The blonde had been her friend for years, along with Kushina. She was fighting Naruto in order to validate his story. The man looked like an ordinary civilian, though his clothes hid any sort of muscular build that he might have. He had said that he had fought off multiple shinobi at once, which would require skill in taijutsu that she couldn't believe from an ordinary civilian. His chakra levels were also barely higher than a mid-level genin, so that ruled out any sort of physical enhancement via chakra. Using it more than a few times would drain his chakra to near exhaustion, and it was incredibly unlikely that he would have been able to take out each shinobi in a single movement. As she appeared directly in front of the elderly, dark-haired man, Mikoto learned something new about not only Naruto, but Minato as well. The first she learned when, instead of flying back from a straight kick to the stomach, Naruto caught his kick at his chest, gripping her foot with his 2 hands. Lifting both hands upwards, Mikoto found herself off balance as her foot was forcibly raised above her head, though she forgot about this as her one grounded leg was swept out from under her. Momentarily hanging motionlessly in midair, waiting for gravity to take a hold of her once more, Mikoto found a fist burying itself into her stomach and launching her back the way she came, tumbling across the ground as she did so before she managed to right herself, skidding back several meters as her feet found purchase on the ground. It was then that Mikoto learned that Naruto, despite her own misgivings, had been telling the truth about his skill. That simple maneuver, a glimpse at his true ability, easily confirmed that. The second part to this that Mikoto learned was that Naruto's skills had not dulled in the years since he had taken down those ninja. It was when Mikoto came back to her senses, her inner musings over, that she realized something about Minato. As her eyes came back into focus, her brain had just enough time to process a single thought before a fist impacted her face, launching her backwards, her body crashing into the river behind her with a splash. Minato fights just like his Tucson, with speed. Retracting his fist from its extended position, Naruto turned to look at the 2 audience members who were both watching him with partially opened mouths. A slight frown made it to Naruto's face as he spoke. "Either you thought I was lying," Naruto told them both, "when I said that I took down shinobi, or you thought that my skills would have deteriorated to the point that I was merely an athletic civilian." "So which is it?" Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. Minato shook his head to snap himself out of the daze he was in. "It was neither Tucson," Minato assured. "I simply thought that Mikoto would put up more of a fight. I didn't expect her to be defeated so swiftly." The sound of her friend's name seemed to be enough to snap Kushina out of her own daze. "Mikoto-chan," she said with a yell as she rushed towards the river in time to see her friend surface from the water near the river bank with a gasp. Kushina moved to help her friend pull herself from the waterway and lay on the shore of the stream, face up, where she tried to catch her breath. "Mikoto-chan, are you all right?" "Yes," Mikoto told her once she regained a normal breathing pattern. "I'm fine." "I underestimated Minato's Tucson a bit though, didn't I?" Kushina giggled a bit at her friend, now that the danger had passed. "Yeah, you got your ass whooped by an old man," Kushina then snickered. "I'm going to tell everyone about this, you do know that, right?" Mikoto paled a bit at the hit to not only her pride as a kunoichi, but to her clan as well. If it got out that she got beaten solidly by someone who could pass, she could off as her father. The Uchiha was about to open her mouth in order to blackmail Kushina into silence when another voice spoke up. "You know that this old man is well within hearing range and is willing to give you a first-hand demonstration of what he did to Mikoto if you wish to keep talking, Kushina." The voice made Kushina pale a bit while her friend chuckled at her face. "No, that's fine, Naruto. Hee, did I ever tell you how young and radiant you look today?" Kushina asked with nervousness in her voice. To anyone else, she wouldn't have really cared what they thought and simply continued doing, but this was the father of her boyfriend. What could she do? Beside his father, Minato gave a small chuckle at his girlfriend's behavior. It was hilarious to see the usually loud and brash Kushina Uzumaki act so nervous, for whatever reason. He could see why Kushina wasn't acting like she usually, being afraid of offending his father in some way, and for him to demand for the two of them to split. He could see how it was a genuine concern for Kushina, not knowing what Naruto thought of her, and not knowing what he was like, nor what it would take to anger him, but Minato knew that his father would never demand such a thing. It was simply a feeling that Minato had, along with a bit of reasoning. From what Minato had managed to piece together, he was his mother on the outside, and his father on the inside, at least mostly. It made sense when he looked almost exactly like his mother, while his father had displayed his intelligence and battle tactics, seeming to favor speed if his short spar with Mikoto showed anything, much like himself. Going along that line of thought, Minato knew that he wouldn't interfere in his own child's love life unless it was dire or the situation called for it, and he was quite sure that Naruto would be the same. It was also good timing that his father arrived when he did. Perhaps he could help with Minato's thoughts were cut off as a sound he was intimately familiar with assaulted his ears. It was that of a sandal coming into contact with wood. Turning his head to the source of the sound, Minato noticed out of the corner of his eye that his father had picked up on the noise as well. Moments later, a figure jumped out from the trees to land in front of the father and son, much younger and shorter than both. Minato immediately relaxed once the person came into view. The subconscious tensing of his muscles was cancelled. The most notable thing about the person before him that Naruto noticed could be split between the hair and face. The hair was an incredibly noticeable shade of gray, quite unique, even in a world where there were people with green or pink hair. But while his spiky gray hair was unique, his face, however, was notable for a different reason altogether. A blue mask covered the lower half of the face, while a forehead protector was tilted on his head so that it covered his left eye. Whether hiding some sort of physical scar or perhaps trying to make himself cool, Naruto didn't know what the tilted hitiate purpose was, only that his sense of balance must be impeccable to be able to leap through the trees at such a pace, without misjudging a step. Looking closer, Naruto noticed a dark ring under the visible right eye, though whether a sign of nightmares or not sleeping enough was impossible to tell with shinobi. They were always on call. The teenager had a black t-shirt and pants on, with black sleeves that had metal arm protectors covering them. Leather straps also made their way around his back and chest. Once they had landed, the teenager had immediately snapped his gaze to Naruto for a second before he turned to his son. "Hey, Minato-sensei, you got a minute?" the newcomer asked. "Of course, Kakashi. I've told you plenty of times that you can drop by any time you want," Minato told his former student. While taking up the position of Hokage didn't mean that one couldn't train again in team, evidenced by both Tobirama Senju and Hiruzen Sarutobi, Minato had decided that he had trained Kakashi all he could, and that it was time for his student to grow on his own, even if he had worries about Kakashi's mental state. "Mama," Kakashi replied, "I know I'm just being nice, but anyway, I heard that you were escorting around with a stranger to the village, so I wanted to come check them out. They must be pretty important for you to be walking them around." Naruto watched his son give a small smile at the young teenager's behavior, but noticed a tightening of the eyes to signify that the smile was forced. His son then gestured to him with a hand. "Kakashi, this is Naruto, the man you heard about seeing me with." Naruto extended a hand for Kakashi to shake, which the younger male did. Both gave each other a nod before the hands were retracted. "He is also my Tusan." Kakashi's eyes widened at the information before they began to rove over Naruto, looking over him in a new light, analyzing him. "Are you sure, Minato-sensei?" Kakashi asked Minato when he turned back to the blonde. "He could be like the others," Minato smiled. "Don't worry, Kakashi, Naruto had given me evidence to prove his claim as my Tusan, and many of his qualities have also been similar to my own," the blonde assured his former student. Kakashi may have been going to say something else, but he was cut off by a noise coming from the forest. "Kakashi, where did you go? If can't find you, I'll walk around on my hands for 2 hours before I switch to one hand then." The loud ranting was then cut off as the source of the noise walked into the clearing. "Aha!" they shouted as they spotted the gray-haired teenager. "I found you, Kakashi, even after you suddenly began an impromptu race to see who would reach Minato-sama first. Such is the power of my youth." The figure then extended their hand, sticking it in a thumbs-up pose while giving a grin, which caused his extremely white teeth to sparkle. Dressed in a green jumpsuit with orange legwarmers, blue sandals, a green flak jacket, and a hitate tied around his waist, the figure sported a bowl-style haircut and dark eyes. Naruto immediately began to wonder what the youth act meant. Had this new individual been dropped on his head? Was it part of some elaborate illusion to hide their real personality? Was it a family trait like hair color or a Kekkei Genkai, or was it simply part of his personality? Kakashi sighed as Mato Guy made his appearance again. He would admit that the self-referred Kitakaki Ao Imaju, sublime green beast of prey, was certainly skilled in taijutsu, and took some pleasure from watching Guy's reaction when he showed as little interest as possible in the man's challenges. When most would find Guy's personality disturbing, Kakashi was actually grateful for his presence. Though there were times when he would admit to simply wanting to be alone, he knew that Guy was probably one of the closest friends he had, not counting the relationship that he has with his sensei and his girlfriend. However, this was merely one of the times that he wanted to be alone, away from his friends, all of them. He had only actually come here because of his interest in seeing who his sensei was escorting around the village. It wasn't every day that the Hokage gave someone a tour of Konoha. "Hello, Guy," Minato greeted the youth enthusiast as he walked over. "Hello, Hokage-sama," Guy returned the greeting with twice the gusto. Guy may have been going to say something else, but Kakashi spoke before he could. "I'm sorry, Minato-sensei, but I have to go now," Kakashi told the group, moving to walk away. Minato frowned at his student's sudden departure. "Are you sure you don't want to stay? You only just got here." Kakashi merely gave his teacher an eye smile. "Nah, I have things to do today. I only came because I was interested in seeing who was with you." The gray-haired teenager excused before moving, now visibly quicker than before, to the tree line, though all of the three males noticed his less than subtle side glance over to the kuna-like monument. A few seconds after Kakashi disappeared, Minato turned to Guy, whose face had changed from moments ago. The once grinning visage had now become serious. "Guy, if you would follow him for a while, all this constant behavior is doing nothing for his health," the Hokage said. Guy merely gave a nod. "Of course, Hokage-sama." Then he was gone, off in the direction of Kakashi, making up for the lead the prodigy had on him. Naruto watched his son sigh and pinch the bridge of his nose. It seemed that Kakashi's actions weren't a recent thing. While admittedly curious about what was wrong with the teenager, Naruto kept his mouth shut. It was most likely not his place to ask. "Kakashi has gone through an incredibly traumatic time in the Third Shinobi War," Minato told his father in a lower tone, almost as if reading his thoughts, both hands returning to his sides. He was put in incredibly stressful situations that he shouldn't have been in at a young age. Because of them, he's developed post-traumatic stress disorder. Minato gave another sigh. "He's also been having nightmares. He thinks that nobody knows, but we do. He started to drive off his friends on occasion to wallow in his own grief." Minato looked off in the direction that his student went in. "I've been trying to help, but so far, nothing seems to work." "Why are you telling me this?" Naruto asked after a few moments of silence between them. "Because I want to see if you can get through to him," Minato said, turning towards his father. "You have lost just like he has. And you're also the only one close enough to him to be able to get through to him." "Close enough to him," Naruto echoed. "I just met him, how can I be close enough to him?" "You're the Tucson of his sensei," Minato said to him. "That's close enough that you could make a difference." "You forget that I've only known him for less than a minute, Minato," Naruto told his son. "It will take a closer bond than the one that is currently between myself and Kakashi for me to be able to do anything." "You don't need to have a close bond," Minato assured. "Simply tell him your story. Tell him what you did and how you wish that you had someone to talk to. Tell him that he is lucky to have people around him like he does." "You want me to lie?" Naruto questioned before he shook his head. "Never mind that. Minato, my story, as you've decided to call my life, is not something that I want to shout to the world. It's incredibly personal. I was a bit annoyed at Kushina telling it to her friend. What would make you think that I would be happy about telling to someone that I have met less than 5 minutes ago?" Minato made a mental note to reprimanded Kushina later for telling Mikoto his father's story without permission. Hopefully, the Uchiha would have a bit more common sense about spreading his father's story. "It's not lying," Minato told him. "I just need you to alter a bit about how you dealt with it, and I know that I have no right to ask you to speak to anyone about your life, but please, Tucson." Minato let out a breath. "I need you to get Kakashi to open up, otherwise I'm going to have to go through with my other option." "And that is?" Naruto asked with a raised brow. "I'm going to have to admit him into our village's Anbu Corps," Minato said with a slight grimace. "Why don't you just send Kakashi to the Anbu then? Why get me to talk to him?" Naruto said to his son, who then began to explain. "In the Anbu, they teach people to suppress their emotions, to help with undertaking stressful missions." Minato said to his father, "I would hope to have this help ease Kakashi's pain, help him control his grief and self-loathing along with giving him a new direction in life, but I am not entirely sure if it would prove successful. He won't see a psychiatrist, he won't open to friends, he hides himself away. Minato sighed and shook his head. Will you talk to him at least once, Tucson? Okay, Naruto said after a moment of thought, but not now though, I will find him at a later time. Gai-san appeared to have taken off after him, and I will not interrupt his attempts to get through to his friend. Minato's face showed him a smile, giving his father a hug before pulling back. Thank you, Tucson, Minato said gratefully. I know you didn't have to and that you didn't want to, but you did it anyway, thank you. I didn't do it anyway, Minato, Naruto told him. I did it for you. Me, Minato questioned. Why did you do it for me? Naruto gave his son a smile, resting a hand on his shoulder. Because I would do anything for my family, Minato, Naruto said sincerely. I agreed because I could hear in your voice how much Kakashi means to you, how much you valued him. Minato returned his father's smile. Thank you, Tucson, Minato told his parent. It seems that he learned of another quality that he and his father shared. Both would do anything for the ones they loved. Once again, both father and son were back in the Hokage Tower, occupying the son's office as he did some paperwork that desperately needed to be finished with a personal touch. Both Kushina and Mikoto had split off from the pair earlier, both saying that they needed to do their own thing. Neither was saying anything, Minato with his head down, scribbling over several pages of paper, signing off on several things and denying several more. His father was leaning back in the chair on the opposite side of his son's desk, staring out the window that his son was seated in front of, watching as the sun dropped behind the horizon, basking in the last of the rays that the day had to offer. While he would have liked to talk more with his son, about what he had done in his life, how he was treated, about his experiences, he understood that his son also had a responsibility to his village, and had put off signing several important documents in order to take him on a tour of his home. Thus, he was relaxing, waiting for the moment where his son would be done and they would be able to continue with their talk. Almost as if he could hear his father's thoughts, Minato lifted himself off of the desk with a groan, rolling his shoulders as he tried to work out the kinks that had developed from remaining hunched over a desk for so long. As moved around, the color of the sky drifting in from the window caught his attention, causing him to turn around fully as his brain began to process the color of the sky with the likely time. Releasing a groan, Minato turned back around to his father, who was now sitting up in his chair and paying attention. I didn't get you a place to stay, Minato let out a sigh as he rubbed the bridge of his nose in frustration. Naruto immediately made to put his son's mind at ease. It's fine, I'm sure there is place that I could rent a room at. Naruto said, a pub or hotel, either is fine. You do not need to burden yourself any more than you already have with my well-being, Minato. No, Minato told his father, you're my Tucson. I can't let you sleep in a hotel when there is family willing to take you in. You make it sound like I've been living on the street, Naruto said in a dry voice before speaking again in a normal tone. I've slept in worse places than a hotel bed, Minato, believe me. One night will not kill me. There is more than enough space for you to live in my house. Minato insisted before pausing and deciding to change tactics, speaking in a low voice, please, Tucson, for my peace of mind. That was all it took for Naruto to cave into his son's demands, expressing his surrender with a sigh. This prompted a grin from his son. You're evil, you know, Naruto said to the young man on the opposite side of the desk as he stood up from his chair, stretching as he did so. Minato also rose from his seat. So you say, but do you have any proof? Minato pointed out as they both moved to exit the room. Naruto chuckled as they walked down the stairs to the lower floors of the Hokage Tower, passing multiple offices. As they moved through the building, Naruto thought it prudent to ask a certain question. Where exactly do you live, Minato? Naruto asked his son. He knew that the position of Hokage gave one many benefits, that much he had managed to glean from Tobirama's position when the Nidaime managed to convince his council during the first Shinobi War to allow a complete unknown to help them. While a Hokage is obligated to live in at the Hokage residence, which is another building close to here, I'm allowed to live wherever I want. Minato told him as they finally exited the building and out into the darkening streets. There, he said, pointing to a building further away, that is where I'm meant to live. It's been simply coined the Hokage residence, and personally, I don't think I'll ever live there. The building is simply too big for me to use. I'd feel alone in such a place. I think I know how you feel, Naruto remarked as he gazed at the circular building. It seems more like a building for a family than one person. Because he was looking at the building, Naruto missed his son's eyes glaze over for a second. Yeah, a family, the Hokage muttered lowly. Shaking himself out his self-induced stupor, Minato began to move once more after placing a hand on his father's shoulder, a signal to continue walking. I actually live in a small apartment in the Shinobi district of the village. It isn't the most extravagant of homes, but it's a place to rest my head. That's all it has to be in the end, Minato, Naruto said to his son as they walked through the streets of Konoha as the darkness of the night began to take hold. That it does, Minato agreed as they walked. It took them several minutes of walking through the quiet streets, occasionally interrupted by a person waving towards them when they recognized their current Hokage. The time it took to make it to Minato's apartment was made quicker with the use of chatter between the two, Naruto questioning Minato about several aspects of his life and Minato doing the same, until they finally came up to an unremarkable building in an unremarkable street. There was nothing that differentiated this street from the one next to it, other than perhaps a different shade of paint given to the building by the owners. Naruto didn't know what to expect when he saw his son's home, but he didn't quite expect something that seemed so plain. Opening the door to the building that housed his apartment, Minato let his father through before closing the door behind him. All it took was walking up a flight of stairs before Naruto found himself outside of his son's home. "Well," Minato said, suddenly feeling quite nervous about letting his father see his home, "here it is." With those words, Minato leaned over to grasp the handle of the door, pumping chakra into the near-invisible seals on the handle before opening the door, allowing it to swing open and admit his father first. The apartment had a homey feel to it, Naruto could tell as soon as he walked in the door. It felt like someone had taken time to turn this place into a home, instead of simply a place to rest one's head, like Minato had told him. There was a kitchen off to the side with a dining table close by for meals, and on the other side of the room, there was a lounge with 2 chairs and a coffee table for people to relax, and a hallway that led further into the apartment. Naruto heard Minato shut the door behind him as he moved further into the apartment. Looking around, Naruto noticed several picture frames on the wall and went to take a closer look at those in the photographs. One Naruto noticed was of Minato when he was very young, perhaps around 10 or so, with 2 other children his age, and a man that Naruto recognized an older version Jiraiya. Taking a close look at his son's face, Naruto could see the small twinkle in his eye that spoke about how happy he was in the picture. "That's a picture of my Genin team," Minato told him when he noticed what his father was looking at. "That picture was taken just after my team completed the final Genin test. It was one of the happiest days of my life." "You look happy too," Naruto said, still looking at the picture before moving on to the next one, this one of Minato when he was significantly older. His son was in the middle of 3, he'd assume, Genin, his 2 hands on top of the 2 young males of the group, tussling their hair while a girl was in between them. He easily recognized one of the boys to be a younger version of Kakashi, but the other 2 were a complete mystery. "That's the Genin team that I led," Minato narrated from behind him. "You already met Kakashi Hatake. The other boy is Albedo Uchiha, while the girl's name is Rin Nohara." Naruto could sense the sadness in his son's voice when he spoke of the last 2. "I'm guessing that Albedo and Rin are no longer alive," Naruto asked softly. Minato's silence washed his answer. "I see, and Kakashi must think it is his own fault for this, correct?" Once again, silence was his only answer. Is it really his fault, or is he blaming himself for circumstances that were out of his control? This time, Naruto got an answer from his son. Neither of them are Kakashi's fault, as much as he would like to believe it was. "Kakashi himself will tell you of the circumstances if he wishes to when you talk to him," Minato told him. "I still don't know what you expect me to be able to achieve by speaking to him, Minato," Naruto said to his son, turning around from the picture frames. "He's more likely to ignore me than actually listen. He has no respect for me. He's more likely to respect a random civilian picked off the streets than me." "I know," Minato replied, "but if there is even the slightest chance that he will listen to you, I want to take it. Sending him to the Anbu isn't my preference, but it's the only option I have available if he doesn't change." "Minato," another voice in the apartment echoed out. "Minato, who are you talking to?" Footsteps came from the hallway and into the lounge area that Minato and Naruto were in. "Minato, in here," Minato called out to the person, but Naruto didn't need to wait for the person to come out from the hall to be able to see them. He had spent almost the majority of the day with the owner. Walking into the room dressed in a deep blue gown was Kushina, red hair hanging freely behind her head. Upon seeing her boyfriend's father in the same room as her, while she was wearing a nightgown, Kushina let out an eep before moving out back into the hallway out of Naruto's sight with a red face. Minato, she hissed out after a few minutes, giving Minato and his father enough time to settle their chuckles over the Uzumaki's behavior. Giving his father one last look of amusement at his girlfriend's reaction, Minato moved over to the hallway, where he was promptly dragged out of Naruto's sight, but unfortunately for Kushina, not out of his hearing range. "What do you think you're doing?" Naruto heard Kushina try to whisper to his son, but fail at containing her voice. "I just walked out in front of your Tucson wearing nothing by a robe. A little warning next time, Minato baka." Naruto heard his son give his girlfriend a chuckle. "It's alright, Kushina," he heard his son say, trying to calm down the red head. "I highly doubt that Tucson." His son's words were cut off by a whack, followed by an ouch. "Kushina, what was that for? Don't you dare say Tucson won't care, Kushina." Naruto heard Kushina mock Minato's voice. "Because if you do, I swear to Kami, you'll get a first-hand reminder of why I was called Akai Kishio no Habanero, red hot-blooded habanero, during the academy." Kushina hissed again, before letting out a sigh and speaking in a softer and more vulnerable tone. "Minato, please, I'm truly worried. What if he doesn't like me? What if he makes you choose between me and him? I know how much you wanted your parents. We both know what my answer would be should Tucson ask me that, which I doubt. Trust me, Kushina, Naruto isn't going to make me choose between you and him. I can tell that much." Deciding to help his son out, as well as put Kushina's mind at ease, Naruto made his presence known by walking to the entrance of the hallway and leaning one of the walls. "You know, Kushina, you could have just asked me what I thought of you." His voice caused the eyes of the other two occupants of the hallway to snap towards him. And Naruto, the Uzumaki tried to stutter out some words, but Naruto held up his hand to forestall any more attempts at speaking properly. He noticed Minato simply standing beside his girlfriend, not looking like he was going to step in, but instead, waiting to see what happens. "Kushina, I know you have your fears about whether I like you or not as a person, and if I think you're good enough for my son." Naruto told her, "Truthfully, I think that you could stand to mature a little, or at the very least think a bit more before acting." He could see Kushina flinch slightly as he pointed out some of her flaws, while Minato remained motionless, though Naruto noticed the slight tensing of his jaw when Kushina flinched. "However, you are a beautiful young woman with a strong personality and a stronger spirit." A smile graced Naruto's features as he continued to speak. "Much like Minato's Ka-san, I see quite a bit of her in you, Kushina. But most importantly, you make my son happy where I could not, and for that I will be eternally grateful to you. Whatever kind of blessing, approval, or permission you need from me, Kushina, you have it." Naruto's words brought a bright smile to Kushina's face and tears to gather in her eyes. Sniffing a bit, Kushina launched herself at him, arms wrapping around him in an embrace that he returned to the red head. With her head leaning on his shoulder, Naruto could easily hear the sniffles that Kushina let escape her lips every now and then as she tried to hold back tears. "Thank you," he heard her whisper in his ear, her voice letting him know how much it meant. "Thank you so much. I won't ever be able to repay you. Just continue to make my son happy, Kushina, that's all you have to do," Naruto whispered back. Finally pulling back after several moments and holding Kushina at arm's length, hands on her shoulders, Naruto spoke to her again. "Perhaps one day you'll be calling me Tucson," Naruto teased, expecting her to become red in the face, but her face paled slightly instead. Kushina then took a step back, out of his grip, and returning to her former position by Minato, all the while giving a nervous chuckle. His son had also gone a bit pale. Kushina fumbled over words for a bit before turning to Minato. "Tell him," she told the Hokage, who spluttered slightly at the sudden demand. "Hang on, why do I have to tell him?" Minato asked, which the wrong answer was apparently as Kushina squared her shoulders and any sort of nervousness vanished in an instant, replaced by irritation. "Because you're the boyfriend, Databane," she told him as if he was an idiot for not seeing it first. "Besides, it's completely your fault for putting us in this situation." "My fault?" Minato spluttered again. "You didn't exactly say no," Minato replied. "So you wanted me to say no?" Kushina's response was cut off when Naruto intervened in the arguing. "Could one of you just tell me what's going on?" Naruto questioned the arguing duo, causing them both to shoot each other looks, before Kushina narrowed her eyes and tilted her head in his direction, causing Minato to sigh before turning to look at Naruto. "Well, Tucson, the thing is," Minato then paused for a second before a prod from Kushina's elbow spurred him on. "Kushina is kind of my fiancé." Naruto blinked once, twice, then a third time and a fourth time, his face that of shock with his eyes wide and his lips parted slightly. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Naruto shook himself out of the shock he was in, his face immediately setting into a deadpanned expression. "Where's the guest room?" he asked. Down the hall, the door on the left is Kushina's and my own. Straight ahead is the bathroom, and the one on the right is the guest room. Almost immediately after that was said, Naruto began to move down the hall towards his temporary room. "Tucson?" Minato asked, a little put out at his father's reaction to the sudden news. While he knew it wasn't negative, it wasn't positive either. Naruto didn't answer. Instead, Kushina and Minato were treated to the elderly man's mutterings. "Minato's getting married. Why would he be getting married? He's too young." There was a momentary pause in the man's mutterings before they continued. "He got her pregnant. That's it. Stupid idiot didn't use protection. This is what I get for not being in Minato's life. No one probably gave him the talk. Must be why he didn't use protection. Boys his age don't usually want kids." Naruto's voice became annoyed. "Great, now I'll have to do it. The one thing I wasn't looking forward to, just great. I just hope they have a banana. I really don't want to be a test dummy." With those final words, Naruto reached the door to the room he was staying in, opened it, and then closed it after walking. It took all Kushina's will not to burst out laughing, despite the seriousness of Naruto's response, as Minato's face turned cherry red, but even she could hold back several snorts that managed to escape. "Tucson," Minato yelled out after managing to get his blood flow under control. "I've already has the talk." "Oh, thank Kami," Naruto called from the other room. Both Kushina and Minato could hear the genuine relief in Naruto's voice as he spoke, as if he had been saved from some great evil. Kushina finally lost the battle against her laughter, and it rang out into the night. The morning came too quickly in Naruto's opinion. He swore that he only just put his head down on the mattress of the guest room before he was awoken by light shining on his face through the windows, and the smell of food coming from another part of the apartment. He slowly rolled over and pulled himself off the bed, taking a second to change his clothes with a spare set in one of the scrolls attached to his waist. Naruto then opened the door and moved out into the apartment. Walking out into the largest area in his son's home, Naruto was greeted to the sight of his son standing in front of the stove in the kitchen, cooking eggs in a fry pan, while Kushina was sitting down at the dining table. Both were dressed already in the same uniforms he had seen them in yesterday. Minato noticed his presence first, giving him a smile as he walked over to the table, sitting opposite his soon-to-be daughter-in-law, the red-headed woman spotting him as he approached. "Morning, Tucson," the blonde said, seemingly forgetting about last night's conversation. Kushina, on the other hand, seemed to be painfully aware of the subject of the conversation, refusing to meet Naruto's eyes, instead keeping her gaze on the part of the table directly in front of her. After returning his son's greeting, and a couple of minutes passing with a slowly build-up of tension, Naruto finally decided to address a topic that would eventually come up. "Kushina," he called to the Uzumaki woman, prompting her to lift her head, "I want to offer my apologies about last night." "No, it's okay," Kushina insisted, shaking her head. "I know that it might seem that we're going too fast, but that's not it at all," Naruto interrupted. "When I didn't give a response yesterday, it was mostly out of shock." Naruto gave a small sigh before continuing on. 2 days ago, whenever I thought of Minato, I would always imagine a small boy who would love to climb trees. I thought that I had changed that view of him, but apparently not. I know that Minato isn't the same little boy that he once was, but that's all I truly know him as. It will take time for me to see him as otherwise completely." Naruto then gave a smile to Kushina before turning to Minato, who had stopped his cooking of the eggs. "Make no mistake, Minato, I am very happy for you and Kushina, and hope that you both have each other for the rest of your lives. I approve of your marriage," Naruto told the couple. Much like the night before, Kushina's eyes began to water as Naruto voiced his approval. Minato's eyes dampened slightly as well along with his fiancée. Naruto placed his hand over Kushina's and gave the hand a squeeze of comfort, the Uzumaki giving him a smile in return. "Thank you," Kushina said, her eyes still watering. "Your blessing means a lot to us." "It's fine, Kushina," Naruto assured the redhead as she began to pull herself back together. She wasn't usually this emotional, but she had been stressing over the approval of Minato's father as soon as she realized who the man was. To find out that the man was happy about their relationship, knowing the full extent of it, made her feel like an immense weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Naruto then turned to look at Minato, who was carrying 3 plates over to the table, each with toast and eggs, along with a platter of fruit. After everyone had been given their plate and the platter placed in the middle of the table, Minato sat down next to his fiancée, and the table descended into silence as the trio began to eat their meals. Several minutes passed, and Naruto decided to start a conversation. Having already finished his own meal, and with Minato and Kushina about to finish theirs, Naruto decided to speak after pushing his plate forward slightly with his cutlery resting on said plate. Minato and Kushina finishing moments later and doing the same. "Thank you for breakfast, Minato, it was lovely." Minato's face colored slightly under his father's praise. "It was nothing, Tucson," Minato told his father. "I couldn't let you go hungry now, could I?" "No, I suppose that wouldn't have been very nice," Naruto said with a slight chuckle before continuing the conversation. "So do the two of you have a date planned for when you get married?" As soon as he asked the question, Naruto got the feeling he was treading on slightly unstable ground with his query. Both Minato and Kushina exchanged a look, seeming to have a silent conversation, before the male of the two spoke up. "Well, we don't really have anything planned," Minato said to Naruto's surprise. "Why not?" Naruto asked. "Well," Minato shifted uncomfortably before talking, "I proposed about a year ago, when I felt that the Third Shinobi War was going to end, and while I knew that we wouldn't get married during the Shinobi War, I didn't expect to become so famous after the fighting stopped. Becoming Hokage wasn't really on my mind when I proposed." Minato seemed to pause here and Kushina took over, her face showing annoyance. "With Minato as Hokage, anyone close to him becomes a target to someone with a grudge," she huffed. "Minato-kun here is afraid that I might be hurt by people looking to go after him if it becomes common knowledge that we're married. He underestimates me," she said in annoyance. "Now you know that's not true," Minato told her. "I don't underestimate your skills, Kushina, I just care about you." "Why don't you just sign the paperwork to say you're married?" Naruto asked, stopping Kushina from speaking and causing an argument to erupt. To Naruto's surprise, Kushina colored red slightly before speaking. Minato gained a smile on his face and wrapped an arm around her back, pulling her against him. She managed to pull herself out of his grip, her face still slightly red as she finally answered. "That would actually be my fault," she said a bit meekly. "Ever since I was a little girl, I always wanted to have this beautiful wedding ceremony and get walked down the aisle." Kushina's face flushed again when Minato gave a small chuckle. "Don't worry," he told Kushina, pulling her against him. Kushina then buried her face into his side. "I don't think any less of you for wanting that. But it's my fault," she mumbled into his side. "If I didn't want a wedding ceremony, then we would be married right now." "That's true," Minato said, "but then it's also my fault for wanting to give you that ceremony, even after you said that it no longer mattered." Kushina then embraced her future groom side on. "I love you," she told him, her face pressed against him. "I love you too," Minato replied as he held her with one arm. Naruto watched the happy couple embrace each other with a smile. It was plain to see that both were completely happy with the other and both were ready to spend the rest of their lives with the other, despite their somewhat young age. "Can't you do it in secret somehow?" Naruto questioned, unfortunately ending to moment between his son and his fiancée. "Get someone to set up a wedding under a different name and then leaving to go to it." Minato shook his head with a sigh. "There is still the monk. While I would trust them to remain silent if someone asked them about who they did the wedding for, I wouldn't trust them to remain silent under torture." "Tucson, you underestimate the kind of fear that I have inspired in people," Minato said in a sad tone. "I killed an entire platoon of Iwa ninja for Konoha. That kind of power inspired a lot of anger and fear, in Iwagakure especially. If there is even an inkling that I am getting married, they will most likely pounce on it. The only other people who know about our engagement are notable ninja, Tucson," Minato continued. "It would be instantly suspicious if one of them was spotted organizing a wedding, even more so if they had no known relationship. If this knowledge went to anyone who found it worthy of investigating further, all they would have to do would be to bribe the planner to tell them where the wedding is taking place, and they would know." Minato gave a sigh and rubbed Kushina's back. "Perhaps after the war is over and all the hype over my deeds has retreated, maybe then we can get married." Naruto let his mind wander, trying to think up a solution to his son's problem. Not only would this make his son, and soon-to-be daughter-in-law, incredibly happy, but it would be the first notable event in Minato's life that he would be attending after reuniting with his son. As his mind went over multiple plans, almost all of them shot down in some way or another, and the other being completely ridiculous, a thought formed that quickly became a plan that made it through multiple scenarios that Naruto applied it over. "Minato," the genjutsu-wearing man said, causing the natural blonde to focus on him, "what if I did it?" When Kushina straightened up at his question and Minato motioned for him to elaborate, Naruto continued. "Currently, not many people know me as your Tucson, correct?" Minato gave a hesitant nod. "Well, there is Kakashi, Mikoto, and the Anbu that were in the room when you arrived." Kakashi most likely wouldn't have told anyone, at least not straight away, Minato said as he began thinking. He might lord it over Guy for a week or two, knowing why you're so important that I would escort you around the village before letting Guy know, but that's if Guy asks. Mikoto might tell her husband, Fugaku, but she should keep quiet about it until I make a formal announcement to the village that you're related to me. The Anbu won't say a word, they all know better than to talk about anything that they do once they don their masks. Other than that, none should know. Why, what are you planning? Well, Naruto began, I was just thinking that, what if I got the wedding supplies, sealed them into a few scrolls, took them somewhere to set up the wedding, and then you arrived later? Naruto proposed, I could take the place of a monk, it shouldn't take long to memorize most of what I'm meant to say. The only problem I can see is you being able to arrive in time as well as get back before anyone notices. Naruto watched as Minato began to think over the plan, Kushina doing the same with furrowed brows. If several things are ironed out, I don't see why not, Minato said after several moments of thought. I could direct you to a store here in Konoha that can supply you with wedding supplies, but do you have a place to set up the wedding at? Looking at his father, Minato watched as indecision passed through his eyes for several seconds. Whatever it was, Minato could see that his father was arguing with himself over something that involved a place for the wedding. For several bone-chilling moments, Minato entertained the idea that Naruto was going to lead himself and Kushina into a trap that would end in their deaths. That train of thought was quickly crushed just as his father reached the end of his internal argument. Yes, he told them simply, I do. Where is it? Minato inquired, wanting to know more about the place that his father would be taking them and to satisfy the nagging voice in his head that he was going to be led into a trap. It's a secret, Naruto told them with a smile, and it will be perfect, I promise. It didn't satisfy the voice, but his father's smile put it at ease slightly. He could feel the sincerity in the act. I will get the supplies today if I can, Naruto told them. I'll set off later today. The quicker this happens, the less of a chance of someone finding out about it. A small frown appears on his forehead. I still don't know how you're going to get there and back without raising suspicions. His questions seemed to amuse Minato and Kushina greatly, judging by the look they gave each other and the one they gave him. Tucson, did you not look up as to why I became famous? Minato questioned his father, who shrugged at the question. Not exactly, I was more focused on getting to you than actually finding out why your name was so well known. I know that you fought against Iwa and were one of the main reasons that Konoha won the war. I think I heard something about you moving incredibly fast. Naruto told his son as he thought back to find out why his son was as famous as he was. Minato gave a small chuckle. Not exactly, Tucson, Minato said. Naruto's son then reached around to the small of his back before pulling back, this time holding a bulkier version of a kunai with 3 prongs. The middle of the 3 prongs was longer than the 2 attached to the side. The handle was also thicker than a regular kunai, with a kind of script for Fuinjutsu wrapped around it. Minato placed it in the middle of the table, where Naruto quickly picked it up and began to study the many seals inscribed on the handle, turning it over in his hand. It is called Hurashin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God Technique, Minato explained as Naruto continued to examine the inscriptions on the handle of the tripronged kunai. It allows me to transport myself instantly to a location marked by the Fuinjutsu script around the handle, and by placing them on a projectile, you have the ability to teleport to anywhere you throw one of this kunai. Naruto finished, seeing what his son had accomplished. It's remarkable, Minato, Naruto told him while putting the kunai back down in the middle of the table. I assume that you want me to take one of this kunai and then somehow signal you to tell you that everything is prepared. Correct, Minato said before continuing, but you don't need to worry about signaling me. If you channel some chakra into the handle and then throw it, I'll feel a kind of buzz in the back of my mind that tells me one of my kunai has been thrown and be able to teleport myself and Kushina to your location. Wherever you are you sure? Naruto asked, somewhat hesitantly. The place that I have in mind is quite far away, would you be able to make it the distance? Minato shook his head. Distance is not a problem, the amount of chakra for the jump between each kunai is always the same. Minato told his father, but not elaborating on how that was. Naruto didn't push his son, knowing that he would always have his secrets, just like Naruto would have his. Make sure that you signal that you're ready at the beginning of the day so that I can call for a day off for myself and Kushina. While our engagement is secret, our boyfriend-girlfriend relationship isn't. If both of us called for the day off, most would think that we would be having day by ourselves, Minato said to his father, ironing out the details. I will, Minato, Naruto replied, beginning to get up, Kushina and Minato doing the same. The two of you merely need to be ready when I call. Naruto then turned towards the door before turning back. I'll get the supplies now. The quicker this happens, the less of a chance there is of anyone finding out and it getting ruined. Walking around the table, Naruto gave both his son and future daughter-in-law a hug, not quite feeling as if his relationship had progressed far enough for him to do anything more. Moving to the door and opening it, Naruto was forced to turn around when his son called him. Tucson. Turning around, Naruto caught the object that was lazily thrown in his direction. Getting a good look at it proved it to be one of Minato's tri-pronged kunai. You almost forgot that, Minato said when Naruto raised his head. Thank you, Minato, Naruto replied as he held the object, tucking it into his sleeve so that no one would see it until he could put it somewhere safe. Once again, he said as he stepped outside the doorway, ready to close the door as he left. Congratulations on your engagement, Minato. I'm sure that your Kasan is watching wherever she is with a smile. I know that she would be proud of the man that you have become. A smile made its way to Minato's face as he thought about making his mother proud. Thank you, Tucson, that means a lot. Minato thanked his father for his words, while his father gave him a smile. You don't need to thank me, Minato. I need to thank you for turning into such a man. You have truly made me the happiest Tucson in the world by turning out as you have. The disguised man said to the blonde, Kushina. He addressed the redhead. Thank you supporting my son when I could not. It's nothing, Naruto, she said with a similar smile that was being worn by her future husband. Thank you for accepting me. Naruto gave her a nod before talking to the both of them. I shall see you both in the future on the day of your wedding, the black-haired man said, and don't be late, Minato. He added as a parting comment as he closed the door. I don't think Kushina would like you if you did. The Uzumaki's smile seemed to suddenly become a bit too sweet. Don't worry, Kushina assured Naruto. Now that I'm having my wedding, I'll make sure that Minato-kun and I arrive right on time. The last thing that Naruto saw as he closed the door was a still smiling Kushina turned to a suddenly nervous Minato. Right, Minato-kun. Naruto chuckled as the door to the apartment closed, and he made his way to the ground floor and out of the building. He couldn't help but shake his head at Kushina's behavior. Just like Minami, he muttered before walking down the street towards his destination. But it was only down the street that something hit Naruto. They didn't tell me where the shop was. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notification, and also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.